Welcome to the debate.
Today, we're diving into something pretty fundamental, really, the human need for meaning and connection.
That's right, and our discussion today comes from the source material, The Human Need Meaning Through Connection and Contribution. It looks into that kind of unsettling feeling, maybe hollow or numb, that people get when they don't feel needed.
Yeah, it's a powerful feeling. And the core question we're tackling is this. Is finding meaning and getting past that disconnection mainly about, immediate outward action? Concrete life tasks, as the article calls them.
Or is there a crucial role for looking inward, for introspection, understanding your internal state, to really effectively re-engage with purpose? That's the crux of it. My perspective, drawn from the text, really emphasizes that the path to meaning is, well, predominantly through direct, concrete action and external contribution.
And I'll be arguing for, let's say, a more nuanced view. One that suggests understanding your internal state is actually a vital complement, maybe even necessary alongside those external tasks.
Okay. So looking at the source material, it presents a remarkably direct and potent argument for an active, outward-focused solution. It frames this feeling of disconnection almost entirely as a biological imperative. There's not much ambiguity. It says, quote, "The need to matter is ancient and wired into our biology."
Right.
And it's not just poetic language. The article explains our nervous system actually punishes you with a quiet fog of pointlessness when it senses you're not contributing meaningfully. This fog, it says, is a built-in biological nudge pushing you back toward connection and meaning. It's almost like an evolutionary prod, you know?
A nudge.
Exactly. And this biological drive is then tied directly to Alfred Adler's three great life tasks. That's work, love, and community. These aren't treated as like abstract ideals, but as concrete and immediate responsibilities. They're described as ongoing duties that integrate you into human society. The practical advice section really doubles down on this. Anchor yourself in small but real responsibilities. Go to school or work even if you don't love it, and simple things like call your mother, visit a friend, buy someone a small gift. And the key instruction, do these things well.
Okay.
And maybe most tellingly, the article explicitly warns against endless self-introspection, thinking about how bad you feel instead of turning outward. It just flatly states, the solution requires shifting focus to others. So from this perspective, meaning isn't something you excavate from inside yourself. It arises directly from contributing externally, from, solving problems others rely on you for, making your absence felt.
Okay, I absolutely understand the force of that biological argument. And the case for outward action is compelling, no doubt. But I do feel that the article's very strong dismissal of introspection, well, it might be oversimplifying what's actually quite a complex process, this re-engaging with purpose. While I completely acknowledge how important contribution is, I'm just not fully convinced that some kind of internal processing or understanding isn't a necessary partner to those external tasks if you want, lasting meaning. I mean, the article itself describes the problem not just as a biological signal, but uses terms like a quiet fog of pointlessness and disconnection. These feel like profoundly psychological experiences, right? Even if they have a biological trigger. And think about Adler himself. His field was individual psychology, which is all about exploring the unique internal landscape of a person. The article mentions his own childhood struggles with illness shaped his understanding of human resilience. That suggested deep personal understanding of one's own state can be incredibly formative.
Okay, but formative doesn't mean necessary for everyone to find meaning now.
Well, perhaps. But look at how the text talks about the tasks. Yes, they are concrete, but it also encourages us to embrace what's in front of you as your life task. It even brings in Viktor Frankl, talking about the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal. Now, to embrace something or to identify a goal as worthwhile, that really suggests a conscious internal decision, doesn't it? A shift in perspective. That feels like more than just mechanically performing duties. If you only focus externally without that internal kind of valuation, Aren't you risking neglecting the individual's unique psychological roadblocks to connection? You might end up with just superficial engagement, not that deep, genuine integration the article also talks about.
Precisely that it bypasses the need for that kind of deep internal processing you're describing. It suggests an almost mechanistic response system. The text describes it, as I said, as direct, even punitive. When your nervous system detects you're not contributing meaningfully, it punishes you. This isn't framed as an invitation for contemplation. It's presented as a built-in biological nudge pushing you back. The solution offered is to respond directly to that powerful signal with outward action. The article seems incredibly clear on this point. A life task is not hidden inside you, it's always right in front of you. Trying to introspect, in this specific context presented by the source, seems like it only diverts energy from the fundamental, biologically driven solution. It risks keeping you stuck in the fog rather than taking the action needed to clear it.
I certainly agree. The biological nudge is powerful, it's real. But I suppose where we differ is on the response to that signal. I don't think it has to be purely automatic or unthinking. Just saying a life task is always right in front of you feels like it simplifies the human experience of making meaning. Adler's individual psychology as a field doesn't really paint us as just robots responding to stimuli, does it? We are driven by fundamental needs, sure, but how we address them seems deeply informed by our unique psychology, our history, our current internal state. For someone really caught deep in that quiet fog of pointlessness, simply being told to embrace what's in front of you might be incredibly difficult. Or at the very least, it might require a conscious internal shift, a moment of reframing to genuinely connect with that task.
But does it require it?
Well, I think without that internal shift, the action might feel forced, maybe even resentful, certainly not truly embraced. And this conscious embracing, this internal act of saying, yes, this matters to me, or I see how this connects, that feels like a form of productive introspection. It's not the endless self-pitying kind the article warns against. It feels like a necessary step to align your internal world with the external demand. It makes the engagement feel more authentic and probably more sustainable too.
I'm still not convinced that embracing necessitates a deep internal dive, at least not in the way the article frames the solution. It really emphasizes the doing as the primary generator of meaning. The practical advice is so straightforward. Go to school or work, even if you don't love it, and then, crucially, do these things well. The argument seems to be that this very act of contribution, that's what reframes even frustrating or menial jobs as meaningful contributions. Why? Because it's keeping life and family together. Meaning isn't positioned as a prerequisite you need to find before you act. It seems to be generated through the act of contribution itself, regardless of how enthusiastic you feel inside at the start or whether you've done some conscious internal reframing. The problem to find is the absence of being needed, and the solution is active external contribution that directly fills that gap. The feeling of purpose, based on the source, follows the action. It doesn't have to come first.
That's a very strong point about the power of action, absolutely. But it makes me wonder, how deeply integrated, how truly felt is that meaning if the person hasn't on some level genuinely embraced it from within? You brought up the Frankl quote earlier too, the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal. That phrase suggests more than just, going through the motions. It implies an internal identification with the worthiness of the goal, a personal investment that goes beyond just obligation. Performing tasks, even performing them well, without some level of internal grasp of their value beyond just, say, paying the bills, well, it could just create a kind of busyness, couldn't it?
Busyness that contributes, though.
Contributing busyness, yes, but it might still leave that fog of pointlessness lingering underneath, because the connection isn't fully internal. We can contribute externally without feeling internally connected or purposeful. For a contribution to be genuinely meaningful in a lasting way, I tend to think it often needs to come from a place of internal conviction, where the value of the action resonates with who you are and what you see as your broader purpose.
But the text directly addresses that potential pitfall. It frames endless self-introspection as precisely the counterproductive path. The article is, unequivocal about the danger, thinking about how bad you feel instead of turning outward. It positions introspection not as a potentially helpful tool, but as a trap, a diversion from the real solution, which is explicitly stated as shifting focus to others. The problem, as we've agreed the source defines it, is a lack of external need. The solution? External contribution. Dwelling internally, by this logic, only prolongs the suffering by keeping the focus on the self, instead of engaging with the external world where meaning is found through being needed. The article draws a very clear line. Productive action leads outward. Unproductive internal focus just reinforces the negative state. It doesn't really leave room for a good kind of introspection when the biological signal is apparently so clear in demanding action.
I agree, of course, that endless self-introspection, just wallowing in negativity, is absolutely unproductive. The word endless is definitely key to the article's warning. I give you that. However, I think we need to make a distinction between that kind of useless rumination and what I'd call productive introspection. Productive introspection isn't about sitting around thinking, oh, how bad I feel. It's more like an active, purposeful, cognitive engagement with your internal state. It's a conscious effort, maybe, to understand the nature of that quiet fog. And then, crucially, to perhaps reframe a task's significance or identify specific internal barriers like fear or lack of confidence that might be preventing genuine engagement. For instance, understanding how a seemingly menial job actually contributes to keeping life and family together. To really grasp that connection and integrate it, that takes a bit of cognitive reframing, doesn't it? That's not passive dwelling. It's an active internal process. And I think it allows an individual to better align with and genuinely commit to that biological nudge, fostering a more authentic and, I suspect, more sustained connection to their tasks and their community. Without some internal processing to make sense of the external demand, the outward actions might just feel hollow or forced. It could lead to a sort of surface-level engagement rather than the deep, meaningful integration we're ultimately talking about.
But see, if we start encouraging people to dissect the nature of the quiet fog or try to internally reframe a task's significance, aren't we just cracking open the door to the very endless self-introspection the article warns so strongly against? The beauty, perhaps, of the source material solution is its directness, its efficiency. It seems designed precisely to avoid getting lost in those internal labyrinths. It kind of bypasses the need for subjective interpretation by stating the responsibility is always right in front of you. That biological imperative doesn't seem to wait around for cognitive reframing. It demands action. The risk, I think, in allowing for productive introspection is that it could easily slide into analysis paralysis, ultimately preventing the very outward action that the article argues is the only real fix for that feeling of pointlessness. The most solid meaning, according to this source, seems to come from the objective reality of being depended upon, not from a subjective sense of worth that might be fragile or, change from day to day.
I do appreciate that concern about analysis paralysis. It's a real risk. But again, I think the article's warning is specifically against unproductive rumination, not necessarily against all internal processing. Maybe think of it like this. A compass points north, right? That's like the biological nudge pointing toward connection. But to actually use that compass effectively to get somewhere, you still need to understand where you are now, look at the map, understand the terrain, figure out how to navigate around obstacles. Productive introspection is maybe like reading the map alongside the compass. It gives context, helps you plot a course you can actually stick with. Without some internal understanding of why you feel disconnected or how a specific task genuinely fits into a worthwhile goal for you, the external actions might just be performed robotically. Or worse, they might be abandoned as soon as things get tough. True resilience, maybe like Abu Un's story suggests, isn't just about doing. It often involves understanding and integrating your purpose. It allows for a more committed, more deeply rooted engagement that's better equipped to resist that fog of pointlessness. It's about making the external actions genuinely feel like yours, not just duties someone else prescribed.
Okay, so to wrap up my position, the source material provides, I think, a clear, actionable framework. Meaning is fundamentally rooted in a biological need to be needed. And this need is addressed directly, maybe even primarily, by active outward contribution through these concrete life tasks. The path to overcoming disconnection, therefore, involves consciously shifting focus onto others, embracing immediate responsibilities, rather than getting bogged down in internal deliberation or subjective interpretations of worth. The article makes a very strong case, I feel, that our deep-seated evolutionary programming dictates that real purpose is found in serving and being integrated into the external social world.
And to summarize my perspective, while the power of outward action is undeniable and the dangers of unproductive rumination are very real, the article itself, I think, subtly hints at, or at least allows for, a more nuanced approach. For a truly integrated, resilient, and sustainable sense of purpose, some degree of internal processing, what I've been calling productive introspection, or understanding or a conscious framing of one's tasks and goals, seems like it could significantly complement and deepen the effectiveness of that external engagement. This feels more aligned with Frankl's idea of striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, ensuring the individual isn't just performing tasks, but is genuinely invested in them from a place of internal conviction.
So this discussion really highlights that the journey to meaning, as explored in the human need, certainly pushes us to consider that intricate and sometimes debated balance between our inner experience and our outward actions.
Absolutely. Finding our enduring place within human society seems to involve navigating that very interplay. The material definitely leaves us with a lot to think about regarding how those two facets, internal and external, weave together to shape what feels like a truly meaningful life.